Welcome back. And as promised, the government's 2025-2026 salary review exercise is one that has had a heavy impact on the national fiscus. As civil servants benefit from the review under a phased approach, concerns arise about the position of parastatals and state-owned enterprises. To shed light on this, we're joined by the Honourable Minister of Finance, Neil Weikenberg, who comes to us virtually on whether a salary review for parastatals is on the cards, how it would be funded, and what it means for the country's already strained budget. Good afternoon to you, Minister, and thank you very much for your time. Perhaps you could just give us clarity here. Is a salary review for parastatals planned?
So correct. Thank you for having me, Notsilia, on the show. It definitely is planned. So we've actually been planning it for more than a year. There was actually a glitch in the tender process. We had no one actually sign up for the first time we went out on tender for this. But we went out on tender again, and the tender has not been successful. So we have actually concluded the tender process to actually find a consultant to do the review. So it's definitely on the cards. The review will definitely be started early, first thing in the new year. Actually, the review we'll be looking at, keeping in mind it's a salary review and a benchmarking exercise. So it's a combination of both. Really is trying to make sure that not only do you look at entity by entity, but also looking at entities across the board. Because for a while, we've only been allowing state-owned entities that have been performing well to actually do salary reviews and to do salary benchmarks, meaning that those entities that are not doing well have really lagged behind very badly, almost making it very tough for them to really actually now come around. So the idea is to try and bring some kind of, not to say it'll all be equal, we'd have different ratings of parastatals, but to bring some kind of equality also across parastatals is part of the agenda.
Right. From your response, Minister, then I'll conclude then that the salary review will be budgeted for in the 2026-2027 national budget or upcoming fiscal year. With that said, can you perhaps give us a ballpark figure here? How much does the government have or is willing to spend with regards to salary review and adjustments for parastatals?
Unfortunately, what we don't have yet is any kind of number on this. And so the budget process is still just, the process has started now. And so we are now looking at all the different parameters. We haven't yet even put in an indicative number yet on this. It is still to be discussed at the different levels within government. And that is still to be looked at. And so unfortunately, we haven't got a response on this yet, but I'm sure in a few months' time, by the time I do my budget speech, it'll all be very clear.
And considering that civil servants are still being paid under an existing salary structure, how does the government then plan to, in some way, fund this salary review?
Look, ultimately, one has to always do the right thing as government. And so, it was a very long time before one had done a salary review for civil servants. It had to be done. It was done. It's going to be very tough for us next year because of the salary review. It's going to take a large portion of the, let's call it the increased budget that we're going to be having next year. But at the same time, it was necessary. So one has to view this in a similar light, is to say that if this comes through, to be able to say one needs to do this, we are going to have to look at the parastatals and see how we can support that. One needs to understand that only a certain amount of the parastatals get subvented. Many parastatals are self-funded, which means that they are generating their own funds and they don't get a subvention from government. It is only those that are subvented, which will probably need to be looked at from a budget perspective. And so we are not presuming that it'll be a massive number and far from what the salary review of civil servants look like, but there will be an amount, correct.
Right. And while we speak on subventions, will then the government be considering increasing subventions to cover the upcoming salary review?
So that's what we're looking at the moment. And so at the moment in the budget process, like we're undergoing right now, this is exactly what we're considering. We're considering, which ones should we look at, where do we feel the impact will be, and to try and make a guess. Now, one doesn't know exactly what the outcome will be. So a bit like the salary review process, we'll have to maybe budget something for it. But at the same time, because you don't know the outcome, it's very difficult to try and hit the number exactly. We might have to see in the year what that looks like. Unfortunately, also won't be a quick process. So you probably find it'll only be maybe mid-year. I'm not so sure when the process will be finished, and one will then see how one implements that. So it probably won't be something that will be hitting us too early in the budget cycle. So we'll have to probably budget something and then again handle it when we know the truth of the outcomes of the review.
What could this mean, or what then happens to the parastatals that are not making?
Sorry, I think we cut there slightly, but I think you asked about what are those parastatals that can't afford. So yes, many parastatals are subvented, meaning that they can't afford to carry this by themselves. There's a lot of pressure on parastatals to become more and more self-supportive. It's not ideal having many of our parastatals being subvented. Many of them were set up with a self-sufficiency route. In fact, most of the intention behind a parastatal is the fact that they can generate income and be able to survive off their own salary, or the subvention will mean that we're going to have to consider them if the salary review is showing that they need to get better salaries.
Thank you, Minister. Good news is the government is considering a salary review for parastatals, but then now the big question is when? Do you have a timeline of when we can actually see this review being implemented?
One doesn't know when exactly the outcome will be. The nice thing is now we have finished the process. The process will start early in the year. We are planning for the process to take a few months, but at the same time, it'll be difficult to try and also we don't want to create an expectation of exact date, because unfortunately, sometimes a review comes and one has to spend some time on it and consider it and digest it, see what is affordable, what is not affordable. And so, yeah, the process will take a while. But I foresee, worst case, third quarter 2026, actually it being fully finalized.
My final one, Minister, if the government will be placing some form of restrictions on parastatals when it comes to increases, especially during this period of fiscal pressure?
So, I mean, we are looking at parastatals overall. I mean, we have done a review of parastatals, and we have recognized that we probably do need to try and merge some of the parastatals. We possibly need to bring one or two back into the ministries, privatize one or two of them. So the review has shown that we actually do need to do quite a lot of work there. But we have decided that our PEU legislation is limited in the sense to being able to implement this review and to try and do what we need to do to consolidate and empower many of the parastatals to do better. So we have now, we are in the process of reviewing the legislation. The legislation should be in Parliament early next year. And once that legislation is passed, we will then really go hammer and tongs at looking at virtually consolidating the amount of parastatals. Having about 50 parastatals is too many for a country like ours. And so that consolidation process is planning to bring them down to about 30 parastatals is what the plan is. Again, this is still just initial stages I'm talking about. The full process it'll look very different by the time we finished with it. We know that. But with that process, we foresee a lot of fixing taking place within state-owned entities.
Minister, that's all the time we had. Thank you very much for your presence this afternoon, for joining us actually on the show. Thank you. That was the Minister for Finance, Honorable Neil Weikenberg, showing insights on the proposed, or rather, the salary review